Coming up on a newscast, President Yoon Suk-yeol issues an apology for the tragic crowd crush in Itaewon. It promises accountability for the incident after a thorough investigation and calls for major improvements to the way the police ensure public safety. South Korea kicks off an annual military exercise to be better prepared against Pyongyang's threats. The regime appears to be exaggerating its capabilities and the extent of its recent provocations. Starting Monday, South Korea is making COVID-19 booster shots available to all vaccinated adults. Bivalent vaccines target multiple subvariants of Omicron. Hello, your week's off to a smooth start. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with the top story at this hour. President Yoon Suk-yeol apologized for the Itaewon crowd crush and grilled the police on its response. In a meeting on ways to improve safety, President Yoon Suk-yeol said that ways to improve such measures must be taken, and he vowed to personally oversee an overhaul of systems. Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
An apology was how President Yoon Suk-yeol started a safety review meeting on Monday. It's a scene not too unfamiliar in the wake of similar messages sent by the South Korean leader over the past week, but this time it sounded more like a formal apology directed toward the public.
국민의 생명과 안전을 지켜야 하는 대통령으로서 비통하고 마음이 무겁습니다. 말로 다 할 수 없는 비극을 마주한 유가족과 아픔과 슬픔을 함께하고 있는 국민들께 미안하고 죄송한 마음입니다.
He vowed to double down on efforts to ensure no such accident happens again, for which he said the government will completely overhaul existing disaster and safety management systems and take bold action to improve complicated structural issues.
국민 여러분, 정부는 사고 수습과 철저한 진상 규명, 안전 관리 체계의 전반적인 혁신을 통해 안전한 대한민국을 만드는 데 최선을 다하겠습니다. 제가 책임지고 챙기겠습니다.
The meeting largely focused on how to better manage safety where there are large crowds, as well as the first response system. And not just manuals and systems, but the president also stressed the need to properly detect a crisis and promptly report it, calling for more tailored safety rules for subways, malls, stadiums, and concerts. Among the government officials present at the meeting was the police chief, as the president grilled the police on its response.
왜 4시간 동안 물끄러미 쳐다만 보고 있었냐 이거예요. 현장에 나가 있었잖아. 112 신고 안 들어와도 조치를 했었어야 되는 거 아닙니까? 이걸 제도가 미비해서 여기에 대응 못했다고 하는 말이 나올 수 있냐 이 말이에요.
Yoon signaled at the meeting a major reform in the way the police handle situations with such risks and promised to get to the bottom of the Itaewon incident and hold accountable those responsible for the major accident. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Along with an apology, President Yoon also vowed to ensure accountability for the Itaewon tragedy. Investigations are underway centered on top officials at the local police and fire stations, as well as the Yongsan-gu District Office. Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
Where were the senior police officers? That's the key question in the ongoing investigations into the Itaewon crash. To answer it, an independent investigation team launched by the police is probing senior authorities in charge of Yongsan-gu District, where the accident occurred. At the center of the scrutiny is the now suspended Yongsan-gu Police Chief Im Jae on suspicion of professional negligence resulting in death for allegedly arriving at the site too late and taking too long to report the emergency. The head of Yongsan Fire Station, Choi Seung-bam, faces the same accusation for allegedly failing to promptly communicate with the police and respond to the situation. And Park Ki-young, the head of Yongsan-gu District Office, who allegedly failed to come up with a crowd control management plan despite knowing of the risks. Meanwhile, in a higher police organization, the Seoul City Police Agency, senior officer Yoon Mi-jin is accused of being absent from her seat in an emergency monitoring room on the night of the crash. The investigation team says the probe could expand into even higher level organizations, including the Seoul City government and the Interior Ministry, which hold ultimate responsibility for maintaining public safety. Here at the National Assembly, there are also growing calls for a parliamentary probe into the accident from the main opposition Democratic Party. But the ruling People Power Party firmly rejects the idea, citing the potential for confusion and delays. While the parliamentary probe remains uncertain, lawmakers have held the first Q&A with relevant agencies. Much attention was on the growing calls for Interior Minister Lee Sang-min to resign. When asked about it, he said simply that he will do his best to carry out his duties. 이경은, Arirang News.
Of the 26 foreign nationals who died in Itaewon, the bodies of 15 of the victims have been returned to their home countries. 2 have been buried here in South Korea. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, 7 more will be repatriated by the middle of this week. The remaining 2 will be scheduled for a later date. As of Monday, South Korea has provided financial aid to the families of 17 foreign victims. Each received 20 million won in compensation. That's about $14,000, and up to 15 million won, or about $10,000, for funeral costs. The ministry will continue providing the bereaved families with the help they need, including repatriation arrangements and applications for financial assistance. South Korea begins an annual military exercise as part of efforts to be better prepared against Pyongyang's provocations. The regime appears to be exaggerating its capabilities and even claimed to have launched cruise missiles last week. Bae Eun-ji brings the updates.
After wrapping up a large-scale combined aerial drill with the U.S. Air Force, South Korea's military kicked off its annual Taeguk exercise on Monday, aimed at countering the North's various nuclear and missile threats. The 4-day command post exercise will not involve field training exercises, but instead will be done through computer simulations. It will focus on honing capabilities against potential North Korean threats, with operational command of the Army, Navy, and Air Force taking part. North Korea has strongly criticized the drill, saying it's being held to attack them. Meanwhile, North Korea on Monday said that it fired 2 cruise missiles last Wednesday, all the way into international waters to the southeast of South Korea. But Seoul says this appears to be false. The North state media claimed that the missiles landed in waters just 80 kilometers off of the south's coastal city of Ulsan. But Seoul's military said no such missiles were detected on that day.
North Korea's claims are far from the truth, according to South Korean and U.S. surveillance and reconnaissance assets. There weren't any such missiles detected by our military.
The North also claimed to have mobilized 500 of its warplanes last Friday. But again on that claim, the South's military said it detected only 180 tracks of fighter jets on its radar system. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said this too is likely a fabrication, saying that not all claims made by North on Monday are true. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Choi Yun-dong held a phone meeting with his American and Japanese counterparts, Wendy Sherman and Takeo Mori. All 3 officials condemned Pyongyang's provocation and described the act as a serious threat, highlighting that the regime's ballistic missile launches violated multiple UNSC resolutions. They stressed such behavior will further isolate the North and strengthen the security cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The trio agreed to work together closely to send a united message to Pyongyang on its provocations at the upcoming East Asia Summit in Phnom Penh on Thursday and at the G20 Summit in Bali next week. Meanwhile, in a parliamentary meeting on Monday, Unification Minister Kwon Young-se said there are no concrete signs of an imminent nuclear test by the North, but he said it could be done at any time. When asked about the government's countermeasures, he emphasized South Korea will be prepared to respond thoroughly should the North carry out a nuke test. Starting Monday, adults here in the nation can get a COVID-19 booster shot that protects against multiple Omicron variants. There's been a rise in the number of new cases, though, and that's widely expected to continue into the winter. Lee Si-yu tells us more.
Beginning Monday, South Korea is administering additional bivalent COVID-19 boosters for adults over 18 who have completed their primary series of vaccinations or caught COVID-19 at least 4 months ago. Those eligible were able to reserve the shots beginning October 27th. Previously, the additional jabs were only recommended to high-risk groups such as the over 60s and those in nursing homes, and other adults were only able to reserve leftover shots on the day. This winter, 2 Pfizer vaccines are being offered, one that targets the BA.1 Omicron variant and one that targets BA.4 and BA.5. The former is being administered beginning Monday, while the latter will be given beginning next Monday. This is in addition to the already administered Moderna shot that targets the BA.1 variant. Meanwhile, South Korean health officials on Monday encouraged people to vaccinations for the winter, saying that winter is a time of lowered immunity, especially for those in high-risk groups.
Seeing how we experienced a resurgence in December last year and the year before, I'd say that some degree of a resurgence is inevitable this December, even if there aren't any new variants emerging.
Meanwhile, South Korea reported 18,671 new COVID-19 cases on Monday. That's the highest number of infections reported on a Monday since September 19th. There are 365 severely ill patients and there were 18 more deaths. 이시후, Arirang News.
As of Monday afternoon, train services in Seoul have been mostly normalized following Sunday's derailment. There were delays throughout Monday after a Mugunghwa train went off the tracks at Yeongdeung Station. However, Korail warns there could be delays before schedules are fully normalized on Tuesday. Sunday's derailment left 30 passengers injured. The state-run train service provider vowed to work closely with the Transport Ministry to find the exact cause of the accident. Samsung Electronics is mass-producing 8th-generation vertical NAND memory, which boasts the industry's highest storage capacity and bit density. The Korean tech giant announced it has adopted 3D scaling tech to reduce the surface area and height of cells, while avoiding what's called cell-to-cell interference that normally occurs with scaling down. According to Samsung, the new V-NAND will enable larger storage in next-gen enterprise server systems, while also extending its use into the automotive market. As in other countries, energy costs spiked in South Korea. There are growing concerns over electricity bills for this winter. Already last month, utilities including gas and heating went up more than 20% on year. Here's Choi Min-jung with a breakdown of the digits.
Soaring energy prices are becoming a bigger issue for people in South Korea. On top of falling sales caused by an economic downturn, business owners are grappling with the rising costs of gas and electricity.
I realized that electricity costs have really increased because I reduced the amount I was using compared to last year, but the bill remains the same. I think they've risen by at least 15 to 20%.
Last month, gas prices rose by 36%, electricity rates by almost 19%, and heating costs by 34% compared to a year ago. Adding to worries for households bracing for winter, heating costs for households alone jumped by nearly 40% in October from 7 months ago. One expert says the increase is largely due to skyrocketing global energy prices, fueled by the energy supply shortage due to the war in Ukraine.
The global demand for energy has gone up since the COVID-19 pandemic settled down. Prices were already soaring before the crisis in Ukraine, but the war has brought up the prices even more. Even if the war is over, it is unlikely for energy prices to drop significantly.
Because prices aren't expected to fall in the near future, experts say efforts should be made to reduce energy use rather than relying solely on cutting costs. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, Kyiv is bracing for a harsh winter amid the possibility of a total power blackout. Energy infrastructure in and outside of the Ukrainian capital has become the target of Russian strikes in recent weeks. Shin Se-byuk reports.
As winter sets in, the Ukrainian capital Kyiv is preparing for a possible total blackout. Russian strikes have been targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure, knocking out power at various points in recent months. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, in an interview on Saturday, warned Ukrainians that while they have so far managed to restore much of it, this winter there could be no power at all.
Our enemies are doing everything to keep the city without heat, electricity, and water supply.
In case there's no power, Kyiv's mayor says the capital is preparing for an emergency evacuation of its 3 million residents. Also, the city is setting up some 1,000 warming facilities. In fact, because of the war, according to the Ukrainian government, over 40% of the country's energy infrastructure is either damaged or destroyed. The Russian-held city of Kherson also lost power on Sunday following Ukrainian shelling at Novakakhovka Dam. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a video speech on Sunday that Russia is suffering heavy losses in the eastern Donetsk region.
Very fierce Russian attacks on the Donetsk region continue. The enemy suffers serious losses there.
The president also said that Moscow is concentrating its forces to prepare for further mass attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, especially energy, to which Ukraine is preparing its forces to respond. 신새벽, Arirang News.
The UN Climate Change Conference began on Sunday in Egypt. It's a complicated situation right now, especially with regards to phasing out coal. The use of the fossil fuel has actually increased recently. Shinayong provides a sneak peek of COP27.
The 27th Annual UN Climate Change Conference, or COP27, began on Sunday in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. This year's conference will focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and overseeing the effective adoption of policies aimed at fighting climate change. Among issues being addressed this year is the action needed to respond to record-breaking weather conditions such as drought, heat waves, and floods around the world.
The cascading risks are also clear. So this conference must be about concrete action.
Climate compensation for developing countries will also be on the agenda. This refers to the idea of loss and damage, which suggests that countries contributing most to global warming should pay developing countries that are vulnerable to climate disasters. During last year's conference in Glasgow, the world's climate leaders pledged to phase down coal. However, things haven't been improved. According to the energy think tank Amber, coal power generation had increased about 1% on year by August 2022. This was due to greater coal use in Europe as Russia stopped supplying natural gas to countries in the region. Also, China increased coal consumption following a historic summer drought that hindered the operation of hydroelectric power plants.
COP27 must lay the foundations for much faster, bolder climate action now and in these crucial decades when the global climate fight will be won or lost.
World leaders from 80 countries, including U.S. President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, are set to attend the climate conference. Na Kyung-won, South Korea's newly appointed special ambassador for climate change, will also be there as South Korea's presidential envoy. Delegates and NGOs from some 200 countries are participating in COP27, which runs through November 18th. Shinayong, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, South Korea's first lunar orbiter has sent messages and images from space to Earth, successfully completing its long-distance data transmission test. The Ministry of Science and ICT released Monday sets of images Danuri shot every day from September 15th to October 15th. 15 photos capture the moment of the moon passing Earth from over 1.5 million kilometers away. The Korea Pathfinder lunar orbiter was launched in August and is scheduled to arrive on the moon in late December to observe its terrain and identify potential landing sites for future lunar missions. Close to 2 million foreigners live in South Korea, making up nearly 4% of the entire population. Various cultural events are held to introduce Korean culture and help them adjust. Kim Jong-sil went to check it out.
What you're looking at is a traditional Korean school called Hangyo. This one was built during the Goryeo dynasty some 9 centuries ago. In the past, Hangyo served as what we would now call middle or high schools. Around a dozen foreigners from around the world began their day by learning about traditional Korean clothing, the hanbok. They then headed outside to the yard of Hangyo and tried their hand at making Korean rice cake, tteok.
Foreigners from countries including the US, China, and Vietnam gathered here in Hangyo of Wonju City in order to experience various Korean cultures, one of which is 떡매치기, a traditional way of making rice cake by pounding rice.
I feel closer to my wife's culture, and I feel, of course, closer to my daughter's culture as well. So it's like my culture now.
I asked the principal of the Hangyo why he held this event.
I thought that by learning Korean culture, the foreigners will be able to bond with Korean people and live more happily here.
Another event was held in Seoul's Songpagu district. This time, a Korean cooking class for foreigners. It's an annual event to teach foreigners how to make Korean dishes from scratch. This year's menu was a fusion between Korean food and Western dishes, bulgogi fajita and truffle tteokbokki.
It is very important to give them the opportunity or experience of the Korean culture. The Korean food is very good for them.
Another event held by the district to attract visitors was a luminaria festival at the district's Seokchonosu Lake, where some of the most beautiful scenery that Seoul can offer is on display.
And it's very nice, it's very beautiful, there's a lot of lights, it's very Christmassy atmosphere.
Local authorities said they're hosting the events in the hope that many foreigners will visit to learn and understand South Korean culture. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Today marks Ipdong here in South Korea. This signifies the onset of winter, and temperatures normally plunge at this time of the year. Although daytime conditions will stay fairly warm, big contrasts and temperatures will continue to follow. Make sure to dress in layers to regulate your body temperatures. And a low-pressure system that has developed across central regions is set to bring some light rain. There won't be too much of rainfall, with about 5 millimeters expected. Dry conditions will continue, especially for regions where no rain is in the forecast. For eastern Gangwon-do and the coastlines of Gyeongsang-do provinces, dry weather advisories are currently in place. For those in the area, please take extra precautions against fires. Morning lows in Seoul will be starting off at 9 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Sunny conditions will dominate for the daytime. Highs in Seoul will reach 17, Gwangju 20, Gyeongju, Busan will be topping out at 21 degrees. On Saturday, the entire nation will see showers. This round of rainfall will be helpful in easing off the prolonged dryness. For the remainder of the week, late autumn weather will continue to prevail. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And these are the stories we're following at this hour. From all of us here at Arirang News, thank you for watching.
A new program introducing Korean leaders and culture